Well, as we come to Psalm 119, let me ask you a question. Here it is. Where is blessing to be found in the Christian life? I'm going to leave an awkward silence, so you have to think about your answer to that question. Where is blessing found in the Christian life? Hopefully you felt uncomfortable enough to have to think about how you'd answer that question. I wonder where your mind went. Maybe it went where my mind went when I was thinking about this, to Ephesians chapter 1. You know, that wonderful chapter in the Bible that talks of the status we have as Christians, as those who've been adopted in to God's family. And in Ephesians 1, we read that being part of God's family means that we're loved unconditionally, that we're forgiven of our wrongdoing, and that we're guaranteed an inheritance. And that's just some of the blessings that we read of there. They're wonderful blessings, and I wouldn't in a million years want you to spurn those blessings. But Psalm 119 says there's more blessing for the believer to find. Let me read the first 3 verses for us. Blessed are those whose ways are blameless, who walk according to the law of the Lord. Blessed are those who keep his statutes and seek him with all their heart. They do no wrong, but follow his ways. Can you hear what the psalmist is saying? There is blessing to be found in keeping God's statutes, his commandments, his laws. Being part of God's family, it's like being part of any family. So in my house, the Lee household, just because they are part of our family, my children have blessing. They are loved unconditionally. They're forgiven their wrongdoing. They're even guaranteed an inheritance, albeit a more modest one than Ephesians 1 has in view. When you're part of a family, you are blessed just by being part of that family. But as a child, if you do what mum and dad say, if you listen to those who know what's best for you, well, there's even more blessing to be found. And so it is in God's family. Blessing is found in following his ways. Or to use a different analogy, to put it another way, the Christian life is not a spectator sport. We're involved, we're in the game. And so the psalmist declares in verse 4, speaking to God, you have laid down precepts that are to be fully obeyed. And yet as we come to the second half of this stanza, it's as if the psalmist has a realization. Verse 5, oh, that my ways were steadfast in obeying your decrees. Then I would not be put to shame when I consider all your commands. You see, the psalmist, he knows what he's aiming for. He knows where blessing is to be found. And yet he knows he comes up short. He doesn't want to be exposed as a fraud, as one who knows what's good for him, and yet doesn't do it. And so he puts a flag in the ground. He makes a declaration of intent. Verse 7, I will praise you with an upright heart as I learn your righteous laws. I will obey your decrees. Do not utterly forsake me. And of course, the question we're left with is how he can come good on his declaration, how he can obey God's commands. And that's why I just couldn't do this first stanza this morning, because that's the subject of verses 9 to 16, the second stanza of the psalm. But before you go and have a look at that video, I'd love you to stop and to ask yourself whether you really believe what verses 1 to 4 say. Is it true that blessing is found in walking according to the law of the Lord? Do you believe that? And so are the longings of your heart, are the prayers of your lips what the psalmist says in verses 5 to 8? Do you want to put your flag in the ground and say, this is how I am to live? Have a think about that, and then have a look at the video looking at the next stanza, which will explore how we can actually do this.